Hi, this is Brad, and today in UDK we're going to learn how to make a terrain material and then apply it to the terrain itself and paint the terrain with it. So follow along with me. We'll start off by creating a new material. In order to do that, we'll go into our content browser, and I've got to create a new material, so I'm going to right click just in one of this little gray area here. So I'll right click and make sure you're creating new material. Don't get caught up in any other types of materials, terrain materials or anything. We're just doing new material. Click the new material, it comes up, and what it's asking for is a package where you would like to keep this material. And a package is kind of like a folder where you'd like to keep all of your textures, materials, static meshes, things like that. So I'm going to name it something new. I always like to name it with either my name or my initials in it. Call it BJS terrain package, and then give the name, the material itself a name. So I'll call it BJS terrain mat for material. BJS terrain mat, and it's a material, so I'll just say OK. And then it's going to come up with my material editor. Let's see if I can fit this all inside the recording window here. There you go. All right, inside of here, what I'd like to do is start building a terrain. I'm going to have to, I have very limited space here, so we'll have to, let's see, I'm going to get rid of my material function library, so I'm just going to hide it by clicking on the X over here. And let's see if I can pull that in just a little bit there. Okay, so currently you can see that there's no textures on here, and I'm also going to pull that over just a little bit so we have some room here. And I'd like to build my terrain material. There's a couple things we need for that. First of all, we need some texture coordinates. And so what I'll do is I'm going to type in the word, actually terrain coordinates, so I'll type in the word terrain. And you can see a couple here in the search bar filters through, and I have terrain layer coordinates. So I'm going to just simply select it and drag it over into my workspace. And we're also going to need this terrain layer weight, because we're going to have more than one texture, and we're going to give each of them a separate weight so that we can paint them on. So I'll drag that over as well. And now I'm done with this, so I'm just going to close it. That'll give us some more space. And this terrain coordinates, we're going to put this off to the right side. The terrain layer weight, we'll put that on the left side. And now I need to have a texture that I'm going to paint with. Well, I always like to paint all my terrain in grass, and I've got to go find some grass somewhere. You can either use your own, or just for this tutorial, what I'll do is I'll use some grass that already exists here in the game. So I'll click on UDK game. I'll go into textures. I'm going to filter out textures, and then up here I'll type in the word grass so that I can filter out and so that I can search for things that just have the word grass in them. So I'm going to look for some good grass here. I kind of like this T_S grass 01D, so I'll select that. With it selected, you can see that there's a yellow outline or a yellow border around it. I'll come back into my material editor, and then if I just hold the T key down on the keyboard, T, and then if I just left click, a texture sample pops up, and then in order to move it around, if I hold Control when it's selected, I can just move it into position there. Alright, let's connect these. My terrain layer, or my terrain coordinates, the output of that to the input of my texture sample, and then my texture sample output, the RGB output, which is the black channel here, I'll grab that, click on it, and I will connect it to the layer channel of my terrain layer weight here. Now let's also change some of the properties for these. So I'll click on Terrain Chords, that selects it. Down here in the properties you can see I've got some mapping scale, rotation, panning U and V, and what I'd like to do is give it a scale. Well, the grass I'll start with something small like 5. And what that does is it kind of determines how large or small this texture is going to appear when I finally paint it. The texture sample, I don't need to do anything for that. And my terrain layer weight, it was suggested to me when I first started doing this that a preview weight, a good number, is probably 0.5. And so I'll 0.5 it, and that way you can see it shows up here in the terrain layer weight. And now what I'd like to do is I also have to rename the layer weight in here where it says parameter name. The reason we rename this is the name is when we go and connect it to the terrain, this is where it finds it, is through the name. It connects it that way. So I'll click right here, and I'm just going to call it BJS, and it's got to be a unique name that doesn't already exist, so I always put my initials in front of it just so I know that it's unique. So I have BJS grass, and I'm good for there. So now I've got my terrain chords, my texture sample, and my layer BJS grass there. Now I'd like to duplicate this, so we're going to make 3 different materials. So I'm going to hold Control and Alt, and that will allow me to marquee select these 3. Then I'll just simply Control C and then Control V. That's a copy paste feature. Then I'll hold my Control key and just move it down a little bit. Alright, now I don't want 2 layers of grass, so let's make some changes here. The first thing is, let's make this some dirt. So my texture sample, so I need some dirt. I'll pull this down a little bit, go back into my content browser, and this time instead of grass, I'm going to search for dirt. And then all sorts of dirt textures show up for me, so just pick one that you like. I'm just going to choose this first one here, go back into my editor, and right here I'll select this, and now I can take texture, and where this green arrow is, if I click on it, it says use selected object in the content browser. So it's going to take that dirt material I have selected and just throw it into this texture sample here. Let's also go into the terrain layer, or this terrain layer weight. I'm going to change the name from BJS grass to BJS dirt. I'll leave it at 0.5, and that looks good to me, and you can see it throws dirt in there. And let's do one more. So I'm going to pull this up a little bit. Once again, hold Control and Alt so I can marquee select these 3. Control C, Control V, and holding my Control key, drag them down one more time. And we'll change this texture sample here. Let's change it to, how about some rocks? So now I'll go back into my content browser one more time, and we'll type in the word rock and look for a good rock texture here. So I'll scroll down till I find one that I like, and there's a good one, cliff rock. So I'll use that and go back into my material editor, click on the texture sample, click on the green arrow in the properties. It puts the rock in there. And one more thing, layer weight, I need to rename that. Instead of BJS dirt, I'll just call it BJS rock. And I'll leave the preview weight the same. So now I have 3 different materials that you can see. I have grass, dirt, and rocks. Let's connect these 3, and so you can see them. I'm now going to close my properties window. If I need to open those windows, either the materials or the properties back up, I can come up here to where it says window and material expressions, material function, or even the properties. This is where I would access them and bring them back up. So, alright, let's connect these. I'll take the top layer here, the output channel of it, drag it down into the base channel of the one below it. We'll take the dirt layer output channel, connect it to the base channel of the rock, and then the layer output, the very bottom one, we'll take that output channel, we'll drag it up to the diffuse layer, and then it shows up here in my preview window. So now I know that I've got all 3 materials put together, and you can actually cycle through these if you'd like to see it on a cylindrical or cube or sphere, or even on a plane, what it looks like. And I can left click to kind of move it all around, or I can right click to zoom in and out and see what it looks like. I'll save it by clicking on the green check mark. My material is saved, so now I can close it. And I saved it in a package, and if you look over here in my content browser, it's BJS terrain package. There it is. It says nothing to show. Well, I've filtered out some things. First of all, I'm going to clear out my search bar by clicking on the X. I'm going to clear out my textures filter by just clicking on all, and so it will show me everything now. And the only thing I actually have in my package is that material. Notice it took a couple seconds before it actually showed up in here. That's fine. If you'll also notice there's an asterisk by the name here, that means it's not saved. So I'll go down into my package, the BJS terrain package. I will right click on it. I will say save. When it comes up asking where I would like to save it, it comes up to the UDK folder here, and I'm going to save it right in here. So I'll just, it's called BJS terrain package.upk. I'll simply save this. Let me see if I can pull it into where you can see it. I'll just simply click save, and it saves it right in there. So now I've got my BJS terrain package in here. I can click it. There's my material. Notice the asterisk is gone. Alright, so I'm going to select my material here in my package. I'll pull this off to the side, or I could even minimize it, but it is selected in there. I have to select it because I would now like to apply it to my terrain. So I'll click on my terrain. I'll bring up the properties for my terrain by pressing F4 on the keyboard. That brings up the properties. Let me shorten this window so you can see the whole thing. And with my landscape selected, I can click on the second rollout here where it says landscape. You'll see that there is a landscape material slot. Currently there's no material attached to it, so I'm going to click on the green arrow. Remember that says use selected object in the content browser. My material is selected, so I'll click that. It's going to apply it into there. It may take a moment. There it is. And I'll close this. Now notice that my material turns completely black, dark. We'll fix that in just a moment. Now I'm going back to my landscape tool over here, so I'll go into landscape mode. Remember in the last video, that's how we created our terrain here, and it makes it easier for me if well, we'll stay in perspective mode for a moment. Let's go down into our landscape editor and let's add that material in here. So what I'll do is in the landscape editor, if I would like to edit it by adding those textures to it, I'll click on edit mode instead of none. Let's edit it. And then it allows me to add these layers that we created in there. Remember we had to put the unique names? This is where we're going to enter them. So here I'll type in, and it's easy to remember because for me it's just my initials and the name of the texture, what it is. And then I click the plus sign. There's the grass material. It gives me the option to add another new layer. I'll call it BJS Dirt. And again, hit the plus sign. Gives me another option, and one more since we made 3, BJS Rock, and then the plus sign once more. So now I have grass, dirt, and rocks that I'm allowed to go ahead and paint on there. Notice, well, we're done here. So I'm just going to make sure that I turn it off now. We'll say none. And then I can select each one of these to paint them. I'm going to go back up and make sure that my paintbrush is selected and not one of these others. So my paintbrush is selected. And here also I can change the tool strength and the brush size and all of that. I'm going to change the brush size and make it really large because I'm going to paint the whole, and even my brush fall off, I'm getting rid of that. I'm going to paint the whole layer starting with grass. So I make sure that grass is selected. I hold my control key and I'm going to click, and at first you'll have to slowly drag, and then once it appears then I can just drag over the whole thing here. And so now you can see I'm just painting grass over the whole level. Alright. Now because this window is so small for recording, it's probably better that I go into my top viewport and then zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to zoom way out, and that will enable me to finish holding the control key and painting, making sure that I have grass painted out to the farthest corners and edges. That looks good. Now because we put the lights on earlier in the other video, I can actually see some of the height here. So I'd like to paint some dirt on these on the paths right here, the upper paths. I'll crank my brush size down a bit. That probably looks good. Let's add a little fall off to this. So that will help it blend, and I'll hold my control key, and I'm just going to add some dirt now wherever I want a dirt path. So I'm going to put it along these kind of hilltops here where I flattened them out, and maybe some other areas I can play around there. So I'm just simply painting now the dirt material on it. Now if you'll remember, I had I raised up a mountain over here. Let's see, I'm going to paint some more dirt over here. I raised up a mountain over here. If we go back into perspective mode, we'll be able to see it. And let's see if we can find that mountain. There it is. There's the mountain. And that mountain, I would actually like to paint it with the rocks. So we'll click on rock. And let's see, I could start with that. My brush size is looking pretty large, so I'm going to crank it down a bit, holding the control key and just painting rock on there. So I'd like for this to be rock. Let's see, I'll move around it a little bit. Just navigating around, holding control, and painting rock all around it. So I'll get to the side, even on, there's the, if this was the moon, I guess we'd call this the dark side of the moon. Alright, so I've got the dark side there. Everything looks good. I'm down here. You can see I've got grass, I've got dirt. Notice that because of my fall off, it blended in right there very nicely. I'm going to close my landscape editor. You can see how the dirt and the grass blend in very nicely there. You can also see that if I did not get all of the rocks there, like the grass comes up there, maybe I'd like a little transition. Just this is a little design. Just a little design idea is that instead of going straight from rock to grass, I could actually transition just a little bit and add a little bit of dirt in there. So I'll drop my brush size down just a little bit. Maybe I'll add a whole lot of fall off here. There we go. I'll take the dirt and hold Control, and just where the rock and the grass meet, I'll just add a little bit of dirt there. So just at the bottom, and that adds a little bit of transition in there. So. Alright, so that's how to use, that's how to create a terrain material for your terrain and add it into the landscape editor. We opened up the properties in order to connect it to the terrain using the landscape rollout, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something, and please watch the other videos that I've got in there as well. Thanks a lot.